When we're talking about what we mean by television, right now what we mean is anything you could see anywhere in the country. Back in the early days, it was whatever stations were connected to the coast-to-coast coaxial cable, except it wasn't coast-to-coast yet. So it was region to region to region, and it wasn't until early 1950s that we actually had all the television stations connected so they could all show the same thing at the same time. So you figure, okay, there's television taking off. The early 1950s, except there were technical issues that kept some markets from truly taking off. The FCC, Federal Communications Commission, put a freeze on the number of new stations until they sorted out some technical details. So it wasn't until, gasp, the mid-50s or so that it truly starts to take off. I mean, you go from about 100 stations at the beginning of the 50s to about 500 stations by the end of the 50s. You talk about maybe 20% of the country being connected, capable of seeing TV, to 90% of the country, so TV households. So by the early 1960s, television had taken off.
So the Federal Radio Commission in 1934 became the Federal Communications Commission. What was the significance of that, and has the FCC in the early days, was it a promoter of television?
It was. One of the funny things about how the government viewed television is that it was still considered part of the radio bandwidth. I mean, when you look at it, it's radio waves devoted to images. And so they were a proponent of it because that was an era in which people said, let's try this. Oh, we can do it. Let's try automobiles, airplanes. Well, sure. We could do voices through the air, yeah, pictures, no problem. Again, it took a while for those pictures to get out there. But the FCC had some rules which they had set up to govern radio. The companies, most of the companies behind television were the companies that were behind radio. And so they looked at this as the opportunity for making more money and also having a different kind of communication. I keep talking about money and profit, but there was still that sense of, can't lose sight of this sense of excitement, the sense of look what we can do. And that was one of the driving forces between through the early days of television into its blossoming in the 50s and its full flower with network television and such in the 1960s, is we can do this, we can do this. For example, in the area of news, the sense that Edward R. Murrow, famously on his first See It Now program, Edward R. Murrow had a rich history as a news person in radio, especially during the Second World War. And so he's the one who, in essence, put the stamp of approval, shall we say, intellectually, culturally on television by saying, this is an amazing tool. On the first broadcast, he had Don Hewitt call up a camera that was set up on the West Coast, Alcatraz, on the East Coast, New York, and had the two images side by side on monitors, which he was then showing on his program. And that was the first time you could do that. You could see both ends of the country at the same time live. And so he said, this is a wonderful tool that we could use. And Murrow, in particular, quickly went from the gosh wow aspect to, we can tell some pretty compelling stories.